Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee meeting. Glad to see so many people up bright and early to join us this morning as we discuss our FY25 compensation and benefits for all agencies. First, we'll have Mr. Howard and Mr. Trumka go over that, and then we'll have Ms. Wellens come up and discuss the resolution that we'll take up today to indicate intent to approve or reject provisions of county government employee collective bargaining agreements. But first, to go through the overview, I'll turn it over to Mr. Howard and Mr. Trumka.
Thank you very much, and good morning. We have a lot of information to cover this morning. As we always do as part of this presentation, we will kind of walk through the staff report, trying to provide some highlights of key information. After we go through all the information, we'll pause for questions and discussion. We also have representatives from the executive branch here for any questions you might have. And then at the end, we have some recommendations on this section before we turn to the next item where decisions will be made on the collective bargaining agreement. So just as a big picture overview, on the first page of the staff report, we have the FY25 requested tax-supported compensation costs by agency. In total, the county-funded agencies have requested tax-supported operating budgets compensation costs with a combined $4.4 billion, which is a 6.5% increase from FY24. And as you can see from the table, the percent change does vary by each agency. Important to note that the Council will review and make decisions on the proposed collective bargaining agreements for the county government employee associations as part of your budget process. We will talk about compensation adjustments for MCPS, Montgomery College, and Park and Planning as part of this discussion, but actual final decisions on those compensation adjustments will be made by their respective governing bodies. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Trumka.
Thank you and good morning. So as Mr. Howard said, we've got a lot of details in the packet. We're going to walk through fairly quickly, give an opportunity for questions. But starting on page 2, pay adjustments recommended by the executive for county government employees. As you'll see in the bullets in the middle of page 2, most employees would receive pay increases of 7 to 8% as proposed by the executive for FY25. The table on the bottom of page 2 notes the major pay increases recommended by the executive. I will note that for the unrepresented employees, the longevity, the executive does recommend something that's not indicated in this table, which is a third longevity increment at 25 years for non-represented employees. On page 3, we'll go into the details a little bit more. General wage adjustments, or GWAs. For McGeo and non-represented employees, the executive recommends a 4.5% GWAs effective November 2024. For IAFF and FOP members, the recommendation is for a 3.5% GWA, both of those effective in July 2024. We'll note that the rate of inflation, the CPI, for the last year came in at about 3.6%. So those 3.5% GWAs for FOP and IAFF members are nearly identical to the rate of inflation, while the 4.5-point GPA for others is a bit above the rate of inflation. Going to page 4, and again talking about the rate of inflation compared to GWAs, the data does show that recent GWAs have outpaced inflation. As you'll see, the data shows that from FY25 through FY24 for that decade, the compounded GWAs for most employees ranged between 30 to 34% for that 10-year period, while the compounded CPI was about 22%. Moving on to service increments, the executive recommends that all employees who are not at top of grade and eligible for a service increment receive a 3.5% service increment. And this year's package from the executive also includes a final past year service increment for certain McGeo members. So very briefly, the history. Back in FY11, FY12, FY13, during the height of the Great Recession and dire fiscal constraints, no county government employees received pay increases. The executive's FY25 budget includes a 3.5% service increment for those McGeo members who are employed by the county in FY13 but did not receive a service increment that year. And the table in the middle of page 4 shows the history of the past year service increments for the major employee groups. Moving on to page 5. The one group that does not receive service increments are MLS, Management Leadership Service, and PLS, Police Leadership Service members. In lieu of service increments, those employees receive performance pay increases, and the executive's budget includes $1.5 million in tax-supported dollars to support those performance pay increases. Moving on to longevity, on the bottom of page 5, there's the table that shows when employees would receive a longevity after a specified number of years. Again, noting the addition that should have been in the packet for non-represented employees for this year starting in FY25. The executive recommends a third longevity increment for non-representative at 25 years. Page 6, special pay differentials, and this applies particularly to the IAFF agreement. There are 3 special pay differentials added this year in the contract with the IAFF. One for bomb technicians, a second for fire captains serving as a station commander in the fire investigative unit, and also for IAF members who completed the tactical emergency casualty care course. Each of these would have a specific pay differential as negotiated in the contracts. There are also a series of miscellaneous pay and benefits adjustments that you'll see bulleted in the middle of page 6, and those will be detailed in the collective bargaining agreements for IFF that you'll see in the next agenda item. Moving on to the cost of the pay and benefit adjustments recommended by the executive, I'll turn your attention to the page 7, which is the table that shows the fiscal impact of the specific pay and benefit adjustments recommended by the executive. And it's important to note that we put 2 categories here. One category is total costs. Total costs include both the tax-supported and non-tax-supported. And then we also have a couple of columns for tax-supported costs. Within those 2 categories, they each have 2 columns. The FY25 columns, that's very simply the amount in the executive's budget for the upcoming fiscal year. But there's also an annualized cost column, and that's because several of the items do not take effect at the beginning of the fiscal year, and so the full cost is not realized until next year. Those are items that become costs in the base budget in future years. You'll see at the bottom the total tax-supported cost for the executive's pay adjustments and benefits is $43 million in FY25. The annualized cost is up to $61 million. So that's a difference of $18 million, and those, if approved, would be added to the base budget for years FY26 and beyond. The total cost of the executive's compensation packet at a tax-supported basis is up about 9.6% above FY24 levels. And this year is a little bit different because the pay and benefit adjustments are not the sole factor in this nearly 10% increase in the county government increase in tax-supported personnel costs. You'll see on the top of page 8 a table that shows the various factors that have contributed to the nearly 10% increase. Again, the first row shows the $43 million for the executive's pay increases. That was the table on the previous page. But then there's that annualization, not only annualization from 25 going into 26, but annualization from 24 going into this upcoming fiscal year FY25. That's a carryover of $28 million from last year. We'll be speaking in a couple minutes about the FY24 pension enhancements. There were multiple pension enhancements approved last year, and some of those enhancements, the first cost, do not hit the budget until this upcoming year, until FY12. That to the tune of about $12 million if approved as recommended. There are other retirement costs that are also up a good deal, up $10 million. We'll speak more about that later. Similarly, active employee group insurance costs up $12 million. And the net cost of new positions is another $10 million. All told, again, it's a $116 million increase in tax-supported costs, almost 10% increase over the previous year. Workforce size, on the bottom of page 8, you'll note that from FY24 approved to FY25 CE recommended. There's a recommended increase of 156 FTEs, up 1.7%. And we know that council members have been interested in vacancies in county government. So the data as of the end of March shows about 1,300 total vacant positions, or about 11%, 11.6% of approved positions in the county government. That's down about 200 vacancies compared to the previous year. And of the total, about 42.5% are in the current recruitment process. Moving on to page 9, we'll now talk briefly about the pay increases for other agencies other than the county government. MCPS, the story happened last year. MCPS, the board approved 2-year contracts a year ago, last June, for their major bargaining unit. So very briefly, for MCEA, most 10-month employees would receive a GWA of $2,918, and then they would get their scheduled step increases. Those range, depending on the step, from about 1.5% to 5.5%, but the average comes in at about 3.5%. For SEIU members, 3.0% GWA and their step increases, and for MCAP and MCBOA, step increases, and then 2 additional steps added to their salary schedule. Montgomery College comes next. We'll note that they're the only agency where employees only get a single pay increase. For them, the agreement with AAUP is a 5.3% pay increase for faculty members. SEIU represents the part-time faculty at the college. Their agreement has a 4.5% increase in the hourly pay rates. And for Ask Me, it's a flat $3,000 salary increase for most employees. Park and Planning has not concluded their process with their employee unions. With McGeo and FOP, they're still involved in negotiations and arbitration. And as Mr. Howard noted before, for Park and Planning and for WSSC, those decisions will be made by the boards, but also in conjunction with your joint meeting with Prince George's in May. Moving on to page 10, from pay to benefits, and we'll start with retirement benefits. For the county government, it's important to note that there are 3 different retirement plans that county government employees are eligible for. For most uniform public safety employees and general government employees hired before October 1994, they participate in a defined benefit plan known as the ERS, or a pension plan. For those hired after October 1994 and not public safety, uniform public safety, there are 2 plans, the RSP, which is the defined contribution plan, or the GRIP, the Guaranteed Retirement Income Plan, which is a cash balance plan. On the bottom of page 10, we show the cost increases for retirement. And those are up by nearly $23 million, or a 34% increase, over FY24. And if you look in the numbers, it's all the pension plan. It is not the RSP, it is not the GRIP, it is all the ERS that's driving these costs. And the factors are multiple for the 34% increase. One is those pension enhancements that we mentioned before. Secondly is higher than anticipated employee salary increases, plus the cost of retiree cost of living adjustments, and then changes in normal costs. On the top of page 11, we have data on the participation in the cost of the different programs, and the table shows the level of government support for different employee retirement plans. And you'll note that the average cost per employee for an ERS for a pension participant is about 2.5 times greater than the cost for an RSP participant, and nearly 5 times greater than the cost for a GRIP participant. So another way of looking at this is about 1/3 of the employees account for nearly 2/3 of the costs. Again, with the ERS, there are new costs in the executive's budget for FY24 that are associated for FY25 that are associated with the FY24 pension enhancements, but the first budgetary impact for these only occur in this upcoming fiscal year. Primarily, this is related to 2 pension enhancements, one for McGeo members who are sheriffs, correctional officers, or correctional staff. There's a change in the Social Security integration age, raising it from 67 to the maximum age for the Social Security benefit, which is currently currently age 70. That'll add about $500,000 in cost in FY25. And also last year there was an enhancement for FOP members to increase the pension benefit multiplier, raising the percentage of salary earned for each year of service. That'll have an annual cost of about $3.3 million beginning in FY25. Also for FY25, the executive recommends an additional pension enhancement, this one for IAFF members, and it's the same thing as with McGeo for last year, the Social Security integration, raising it from age 67 to the maximum age at a cost of about $600,000 in FY25 and $1.2 million annualized. For MCPS, important to note that the MCPS has a hybrid system. They have two pension systems. They have a core benefit for the MCPS pension plan that they provide for employees who are not in the state teacher's pension plan, and then they provide a supplement, a pension supplement for all employees. MCPS is the sole school district in the state to provide a pension supplement. All told, the MCPS pension plan will have a cost of about $74 million this upcoming year, and then there's the contribution to the state pension plan, which is about $82 million in this upcoming year. We'll note that the college, Park and Planning, WSSC each have defined benefit plans. None of them agencies plan to modify their respective retirement plans in FY25. Funded ratios. For several years, the Council has asked us to look at the fiscal health of the different pension plans as measured by the funded ratio, which is the percentage of the plan's liabilities compared to the plan's assets. The GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, established a best practice that the targeted pension funded ratio should be about 100%. On page 13, you'll see the table of where the agency's pension plans stand. Of note, the county government's plan did have about a 6% drop from 100% to 94%. Again, that's attributable to the pension enhancements, increasing the unfunded liability. And we will note that WSSC had a market decrease in their funding status, primarily because of much lower than anticipated investment returns, and staff is going to continue monitoring that one to see if it recovers, and we will notify you if it does not improve. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Howard to discuss group insurance.
Great. So now we're at the bottom of page 13, and we'll start with group insurance costs for active employees. And across all the agencies, the total recommendation is $518 million, an increase of 9.8% over the FY25 levels. Again, the percent increase does vary a little bit by agency. With Montgomery College, a little bit of an outlier here because they're the agency that's not seeing the same level of increases as the other agencies are seeing at this time. On the top of page 14, we put together a chart showing the active employee group insurance costs across all agencies, the percent increases from FY16 through FY25. And you can see in the middle period here, FY18 through FY23, group insurance costs were largely contained, growing at small rates, in a couple of years actually decreasing. And then we see these significant increases comparatively in FY24 and FY25. When you see a graph like that, what it usually means is there's been some unexpected increases in expenditures, which then need to be covered by the agencies. If those expenditures had been more expected, you would have seen more of a gradual increase over time as opposed to the big shifts. And we'll talk about what that means in both county government and MCPS in a minute when we talk about group insurance fund balances. Next, we'll talk about group insurance for retirees, or generally referred to as OPEB. As this committee is very well aware, there's two types of OPEB funding. There's the pay-as-you-go funding for the current year costs, and then there's pre-funding, which is put in the trust to set aside for future retiree group insurance expenditures. On the top of page 15, that chart shows the FY25 requested funding for retiree health pay-as-you-go. The total is $93.4 million, or an increase of 4.1%. And there's a couple factors that make this increase look a little bit smaller than the increase on the active side. First, for county government, the executive's recommended budget does implement the new OPEB funding policy that the council adopted. And so as a result, based on the updated valuation conducted in accordance with the new policy, the executive recommends using $8.9 million in funds from the OPEB trust to help pay for the current year costs. So that's why the county government shows a 13.6% decrease in their funding level. Additionally, with MCPS, the board's request and the executive's recommendation continues to use $27.2 million in funding from the MCPS allocation to the trust to help cover current year retiree costs. In terms of OPEB pre-funding, at the bottom of page 15, there's a slight decrease in pre-funding amounts, mainly in MCPS, $59.1 million as opposed to $62.3 last year, and this is based on updated funding valuation. On page 16, we provide information about where each agency stands in terms of their global OPEB assets, liabilities, and funded ratio, and these data are all pulled from the comprehensive financial reports done, and so we also list the discount rate that's used to calculate each agency's funded ratio in these documents, because as this committee is well aware, as you change the discount rate, that changes the your total liability and impacts the funded ratio. So we have the information there for everyone to see. There's a couple of follow-up items that council staff recommends the committee review during the course of FY26. First is considering updated OPEB funding policies for the outside agencies in alignment with the policies approved for county government. In particular, noting Montgomery College has a high funded ratio of 74%, and so that might be in line for an updated policy similar to what was adopted for county government. And two, to potentially look at options to reduce and eventually eliminate the $27.2 million used to fund MCPS current retiree health costs that would otherwise go to the consolidated OPEB trust. So not decisions for today, but just decisions to things to think about in the future, upcoming over the course of the year. On page 16, excuse me, on page 16 and 17, we have information on the agency group insurance fund balance. For both, at the end of FY23, both due to the rising costs and kind of unexpected costs for group insurance expenditures, both county government and MCPS are looking at or saw deficits in their group insurance fund. The fund balance policy adopted by the council back in 2003 is for each agency to strive to maintain a 5% fund balance in their retiree health or their group insurance accounts to help kind of cover different increases or decreases that are unexpected during the course of a year. For county government, they ended FY23 with a $7.1 million deficit. They do project FY24 to be back into the positive, just slightly, of about 1.7 million or 0.5%. This does assume an FY24 general fund transfer. It was assumed to be 10.0 million, but it was recently submitted to the council at $5.2 million, and that will be discussed as part of the on May 1st during the work session on the Office of Human Resources budget by the council. MCPS, the council has also heard that they are experiencing some deficits in their group insurance fund balance as well. It was projected to be, in the active side, 11.5 million in FY23. That's projected to grow in FY24, and also to have a negative fund balance on the retiree side as well. The council did act on a $5.0 million supplemental appropriation that the board requested to provide additional funding to the MCPS group insurance plan, and the Education and Culture Committee will also address this issue in further detail in their work sessions, and then the full council as well when the MCPS budget comes to the council. One thing to note is that for both county government and MCPS, the provision of additional funding, from transfers or supplementals is a good thing to consider when there are unexpected cost increases that need to be covered. Going forward, however, it's important to remember that as a self-insurance fund, that projections and sustainability going forward needs to be addressed through rates, plan design, things like that the agencies will of course be reviewing as they always do.
On bottom of page 17 and page 18, we discussed the compensation cost sustainability. So in March 2021, the council adopted resolution 19753 that established a compensation cost sustainability policy. And in brief, it states that the annual growth rate of total compensation costs should be similar to the annual growth rate of tax-supported revenues. The intent of this policy was to align the recurring pay and benefit costs with available resources without requiring offsetting service reductions or revenue increases. So as noted, the executive's tax-supported compensation costs exceed the FY24 budget by 9.6%. This is the largest increase in almost 2 decades. You'll see that the history of the last decade in the chart on the bottom of page 18, which are the blue bars. The red line is the average 6-year projected annual revenue growth rate. And so for FY25, the executive's budget at 9.6% is increase in compensation costs is growing at a rate more than three times greater the projected annual 6-year revenue growth of 3.1%. On bottom of page 19 and page 20, we have some graphs and tables that illustrate what would happen if this mismatch continues over time. The data in the packet is based on a 10.2%, which is the total cost increase, both tax and non-tax supported. But even at the 9.6% tax supported rate, the 6-year gap leading to the structural deficit leads to about $1 billion. Our conclusion on page 21 is that the compensation spending pattern recommended by the executive produces a budget sustainability challenge. The outcome of a recurring trend of this sort is to constrain the county's ability to meet future spending priorities, including future year pay adjustments, and to necessitate finding new revenue sources. And with that, I'll turn it back to Mr. Howard to conclude the presentation.
Thank you. So on page 21, we have information on the county government compensation-related NDAs. Most of these are related to a lot of the items we already talked about, but the money is put in a different spot. So as part of the recommendations, you'll need to make decisions on these different pieces. The first one is the Compensation Employee Benefits Adjustment NDA. The recommended amount for FY25 is $4,336,137, and this provides, among other things, this is where funds for MLS and PLS pay for performance is located. We also have other NDAs on page 22. I won't go into the details of them, but those reflect the funding for group insurance, either the OPEB pay-as-you-go costs or pre-funding, and there is a small state position supplement NDA of $60,000 that the council reviews and approves every year. For Section 9, did you want to go over Section 9, Aaron?
Very briefly, it's the administrative costs related to the management of the ERS, the retirement savings plan, the deferred compensation plan, and the consolidated retiree health benefits trust plan. You asked that we look at this every year to see if there's anything unusual that stands out. There is not this year, so we will just skip over that.
Okay, and the last two sections before we turn it back to you are the other compensation issues on page 25. First is the executive and legislative branch non-merit salary schedules. In accordance with the county code, the executive branch did submit salary schedules for these two groups of employees. The executive branch schedule is on circles 29 and 30, and the executive proposes no changes to the FY25 non-merit salary schedule for his appointees from the FY24. In FY24, there was an increase of 6% overall. For the legislative branch schedule, the executive submitted a schedule that also assumes no changes compared to FY24. Council staff does recommend one adjustment to this schedule. When the council first approved it, the scale for the LB2 grade, which applies to the hearing examiner and OLO director positions, was specifically aligned with the salary schedule for M1 positions in the MLS scale. So as a result, staff recommends that the committee adjust the LB2 scale to match the FY25 scale that the council approves for M1 positions. And the very last thing is the agency analysis of personnel management on page 25 and summarized on page 26. Each year the agencies do a great job of compiling a whole bunch of data related to personnel and staffing within their respective agencies. We provided just a very brief summary of the information on the table on page 26, but there's a whole lot more that's available in the documents which we've linked as part of the staff report. And on page 27, we have committee decision points, but before we get there, we'll turn it back over to the chair for questions, comments, and discussion.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Trumka and Mr. Howard, for that overview. I will say last year we did do 2 committee work sessions because there is so much to go over, but this year I thought there were fewer decision points to make, so I appreciate you covering all this material in just one committee session. And as I said before, I do want to extend my thanks to our unions who are here, McGeo, IAF, and FOP. Thank you for showing up this morning and showing up every day for our county, because we know as we're discussing these numbers and our contracts and CBAs and all of that, that what is really behind it are the people. And it's the people who make our county run, and why it is so important that we take this time to go through this. I did have one question on page 13 when we were looking at, Mr. Trumka, I think this was your section on the funded ratios.
Yes.
We did note the decrease in the most recent funded ratio for the county government, a slight decrease. We understand the reasoning behind that. But my question is, given what we see is the decrease in WSSCs, which is a bit more alarming, are these things we should be looking out for in the future, just as we're moving through this?
Right. So for the county government, the decrease was entirely a function of the increase in the unfunded liability because we added new benefits that we had not been setting the dollars aside for. So that we anticipated last year. It was in our staff memo last year and is coming in fairly close to what we anticipated. In speaking to WSSC, my understanding is that their big decrease is much more of a function of their investment strategy and their risk tolerance, and in 2022 they did very poorly in their investment returns, and it reflected not in their liabilities, but their assets dropped. There is evidence that it is improving with the improved market conditions, and we've spoken to people there, and what we're telling you is we're going to monitor this because it could very well recover and recover fairly soon, but we want to watch that and let you know so that it doesn't affect rate setting in the future.
Great. But for our county government, it was anticipated, and we're doing okay. That's the story.
It was anticipated, yeah.
Thank you. All right, I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Council President Friedson.
Thank you. First of all, I want to echo the comments you made at the outset about, we're a people-powered business in county government, and appreciate all of the employees who are here advocating, and appreciate all the work that each of you do every day to support our residents. Spoiler alert, I'll be supporting the contracts, but I do have some comments. I don't get a lot of applause lines at the county council, so I'm going to take advantage of this for a second. But I do have some questions. The WSSC piece is very concerning to me. I have focused a lot on pension issues. I used to have that as part of my portfolio at the state level, so it's something that I'm familiar with. I have seen pensions at alarming funded ratios. That is concerning. But that's particularly concerning. The county government one is something that we need to monitor because we made policy decisions, and those policy decisions had anticipated consequences, and those consequences have come to fruition. But we'll see. We're close to 100%. That is the ideal. You really don't want to be above 100%. We're now a little bit below 100%, but hopefully we can approach back up to 100%. But the WSSC number is alarming. Below 80% is when the alarm bells should start ringing pretty loudly, and it's below 80%. Is that you mentioned the risk tolerance. Was there not enough risk tolerance and they didn't take advantage when things went down, and they didn't take advantage of the up? Or was it there was too much risk tolerance, and when things went down, they really went down?
I believe it's more the latter.
Yeah. Well, that is concerning. That pension fund shouldn't be run that way, just from my perspective. So I do think that we ought to, really take a deeper dive into that. Obviously, the pensions are the commitments that we're making, and if we don't have the amount of funding to follow through on those commitments, that is a very serious problem for retirees, and it's a very serious problem for taxpayers. So we've got to get that right. I appreciate us, and I hope we can come back to looking at the policies across agencies, so I think that is a good recommendation, and so I want to just kind of double tap that. On the sustainability piece, I appreciate staff has raised some sobering dynamics here about whether or not increases are sustainable, and we're trying to strike a balance here of recognizing that we are a people-powered business. There are major challenges in recruitment and retention, not just for county government, but for every government, and not just for government, but for every employer, and trying to, figure out how to be competitive. At the same time, we have to be able to afford it, and we have to make decisions and choices, and so I fully support prioritizing the people which are the folks who are providing the services that our residents are relying on, but it is a challenge to both significantly double and triple down on supporting our current employees and also adding positions at a significant rate with large numbers of vacancies. That was a main topic previously in the last budget. It continues to be a concern for me in this budget, and the county executives and the executive branch's response that the compensation is sustainable for the current employees. Essentially, if you don't include the new ones, which is being treated differently, that's not a real response, because that becomes, as council staff has noted, the base budget. And so I just think we have to be serious and sober about that as we move forward and look at what is the practicality of adding positions and how do we address the vacancy rate. I personally think and I hope that the vacancy rate will be helped by providing better and more competitive salaries. I hope that will help both to retain and to recruit our county employees. But something's got to give, and right now those vacancies are really what is helping to make the budget work. But for those vacancies, the cushion in the budget would be a much bigger problem, and so eventually, we're going to be faced with that reality. And I've said before, hope is not a fiscal strategy. We need to get ahead of that, and I hope that the executive branch is focused on it and is concerned about it. That's not reflective in the responses that we've received up to this point, but I just want to point that out and acknowledge that. Related to that, I did have one question, so if I could ask the executive branch to come up. It's about Medicare Advantage, so maybe, I don't know who would be the appropriate, but the broader point that I want to raise, and maybe I'll just raise it and you can share it with colleagues if there's not an actual response. If there is a response, feel free to come up to the table and respond. We need to find savings somewhere. We need to prioritize where we're prioritizing and restructure and refocus in other areas, doubling down on the things that are working and moving away from the things that aren't. I think there's a commitment from our labor partners to do that, and I think we need to follow through on that. One example just that has been raised to me recently is Medicare Advantage for retirees. Jurisdictions all over the state, jurisdictions all over the country provide that as an option to retirees. It doesn't take away benefits, it can add benefits, but it actually can save money. There are projections it could save $10 to $13 million, for instance, in our liability. So I wanted to ask, and that's just one example, but are we looking at that specifically would be one question. And the second question would be, what else are we looking at to find savings and to rethink the costs that we have to make sure that we are maintaining competitiveness, keeping up with our commitments to our employees and our retirees, providing the benefits that we have committed to, and maybe even enhancing those benefits.
Corey Orlowski with OMB. HR is not here, so this will be HR will be getting back to you kind of response, but I can say that we are constantly reviewing cost-saving measures, cost-saving opportunities, improvements with regards to the benefits. And that is not just HR internally, that is alongside the union partners. Those are constant ongoing costs, and we have frequently found that the flavor of the month kind of improvements is something that we're either already doing or is not as good as what we're already doing. So we'll always continue to look for the best option for us as an employer and for us as employees, but that is something that HR is very, very well in hand on.
Appreciate it. Maybe if you could share with us some of the things that you're actually doing and HR is actually doing, and some of the things that you're pursuing, and maybe some of the things that you pursued and realized, to your point, that we're already doing something or we're doing something better. I think that context would be helpful for us to understand what is happening, with the feet of the duck under the water that we don't see, because it is a challenge sometimes when we get things and don't have the full context. So
Absolutely.
If you could work with HR and others who are involved in these issues get back to us. And then specifically the question, that was just one example. So I would love a broader answer, but obviously
the big answer on that is Medicare Part D.
Yeah.
All of that stuff, we were ahead of the curve on that and have seen remarkable savings.
Okay, well, and that would be
but,
helpful too,
there
just
are
an understanding
plenty
of what that
examples,
looks like, what those savings are. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, appreciate it. I continue to, we do need to look at the 156 FTEs, the vacancy rate. I think that is, not directly part of this conversation, but it is part of the broader context of the sustainability. But ultimately, appreciate all of the work, and I will yield back to you, Madam Chair.
Great, thanks. Before I turn it over to Councilmember Katz, I want to say, I bury the lead too. I am supporting the contracts as well today. So for folks who are counting, and I'm sure I turn it over to Councilmember Katz too, if you want to go get your second cup of coffee, that's the takeaway for this morning. But I do want to say, again, thank you all for coming out today, and want to just underscore some of the things that Council President Friedson said regarding retention and recruitment. And we know that when we look at our benefits and our salaries and all that, it's part of, compensating all of you who are doing the job here. It is also part of our strategies for retaining people who are working in our county, as well as attracting new folks to come here. And so, we look at these with multiple lenses as we move forward. And again, just want to thank you all for coming here. And now I'll turn it over to Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. And as was already noted, as provided, I certainly am going to vote in favor of this as well. And I believe, to my colleagues, I believe I got the most applause. But I think it should be noted, you're applauding us. We need to applaud you. And I also think it should be noted, and we talked about WSSC, it's the only time you don't want them to be underwater is what they're doing right now. But I think at some point maybe we should have and I can ask the chair of the Government Operations Committee to have an update in public on what they're doing. It's a huge concern. And so that everyone can be aware, as much as they are aware, we want them to be even more aware. I did want to note that my wife is a retired MCPS employee. My daughter works for MCPS. It's not exactly a part of this budget, but is certainly being mentioned as part of this budget, and I didn't want anybody to be surprised. It shouldn't be a surprise. I mention it all the time. We talk about the sustainability of our budget, and it's a huge concern. But we need to also remember that in order for government to be sustained, we need employees to do the work. And that's exactly what this is about, that they do a good job. In fact, you do a great job every day. You never get enough thanks. People take you for granted because you do such a good job. They just expect it to be done. It's all done by magic. Nobody actually does the work. It's done by, well, it's not. And you all know it, but the public in many cases does not know it. And we also need to keep in mind that not only are these numbers, and I also appreciate the people who negotiated this. I know it's not always fun sitting at a table and people not always agreeing, but I also believe it's necessary. Not only do we need to be keep in mind our governmental competitors. We always talk about Fairfax and other places, but our private competitors as well for these very jobs. And we, as much as Montgomery County and government is a very good employer, they say, well, you're going to get a great retirement. Somebody 21, 22 years old and wants to figure out how much money they have for lunch is not worrying about in the beginning for the retirement. Now, you get a little older and you get down the road a bit, yeah, you're worried about the retirement. So we have to keep that in mind as well. We need to continue to attract the best and the brightest employees that we absolutely have today, and we need to make certain that that we can continue to do what we're doing in a smart way. And to the whole idea, and I'll stop, but to the whole idea about finding savings somewhere, we do. But we need to sit down, and I always say that a community is a family. We need to sit down as a family, as our community, to figure out what's the smartest way to save. And we should do it sooner rather than later. We shouldn't do it just after we're told these were the negotiations. We probably should do it before somebody sits down and negotiates. We don't negotiate. And get this done once and for all, because Montgomery County has been here for many years. It's going to be here for many years, and we want it to continue to be the fine place that it is today. Thank you all very much for what you do.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Howard, before we turn to the committee decision points, I think just to acknowledge on page 16 the recommendations for this committee to review other items with the agency staff, that we will take those up moving forward. Thank you to the staff for recommending those. And then do you need more of a confirmation on page 25? I didn't see it in the decision points regarding changing the adjusting the LB2 scale to match the M1 positions?
That it is in the decision points.
Oh, it is. I'm sorry,
section.
I missed it. Okay, then let's just go to the decision points.
It's kind of hidden below the table. So
okay.
So I'll start on page 27, the committee decision points. Section A, FY25 pay adjustments. The compensation adjustments in the collective bargaining agreements will be formally decided in a minute with Ms. Wellens. But for compensation adjustments outside of the collective bargaining agreements, council staff recommends that the committees make decisions on the non-represented employees that align with the decisions made on the collective bargaining agreements. So if you approve the collective bargaining agreements, it would be aligned with the table that's on page 27 for non-represented employees, with the one change that Mr. Tromka noted earlier, that the non-represented longevity increment includes a third one at 25 years.
Okay, no objections?
Okay, so then the next is the non-merit salary schedule. So it would be to approve both the executive non-merit salary schedule and the legislative branch non-merit salary schedule with the change in the LB2 scale to align with the M1 scale for MLS employees.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Then the next section is the allocations for group insurance. For active employees, it's to support the FY25 tax board requests from the agencies and the FY25 projection for the county government's employees health benefits self-insurance fund, and continue to monitor agency group insurance fund balance projections and healthcare cost trends.
Yep.
Okay. On retirees, it's to support the agency's FY25 tax board requests for retiree pay-as-you-go costs. For county government, support the recommended funding of $44,393,473 for the group insurance for retirees NDA.
Yes.
And for OPEB pre-funding, support the executive's recommended FY25 OPEB pre-funding amounts for each of the different NDAs listed in the staff report. Mm-hmm. For the allocations and retirement, Section C, it's to support all the FY25 county contributions and the administrative and operating budgets that Mr. Tromka mentioned for the ERS, RSP, GRIP, Deferred Compensation Plan, and Consolidated Health Benefits Trust. For the county government compensation-related NDAs, to approve the recommended funding for the Montgomery County Employee Retirement Plans and State Position Supplement, and to approve the recommended funding for the Compensation and Employee Benefits Adjustments NDA. Yep. And the last piece is something that we've had in the budget resolution language since FY22, noting that council approval is required for the provision of general emergency hazard pay for more than 10 consecutive days, and we recommend that the council keeps this language in the budget resolution.
Yep.
Okay, and that's it for item number 1.
All right. Well, thank you again, Mr. Howard and Mr. Tromka, for your work on this, and we'll now turn it over to Ms. Wellens for the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, council members. Item number 2, I'm relieved to say, came after item number 1, where item number 2 is largely explained in terms of the substance of the collective bargaining agreements. And we have here representatives from the Office of Labor Relations, OMB, of course, and the union partners, should there be questions from the committee. Each year, the council adopts resolutions, one for each collective bargaining agreement, indicating its approval or disapproval of each specific term that has a fiscal impact or that requires a change in law. And so that's what you have here today. The resolutions for your consideration are at circles 3, circles 67, and circles 94, respectively. And I think, with your permission, Madam Chair, probably the most efficient, organized way to look through the provisions of the agreements will be the chart that's at circle 1, that's circle 1 and 2 of the staff packet, goes through each group of, each type of provision for the, each union, excuse me, so we can just go through those in turn, and you can indicate, questions, concerns, or your recommended approval, which I believe has been forecasted.
Great. I think so. All right. Thank you, Ms. Wellens.
Thank
Let's
you.
proceed that way.
Okay, great. So the first tranche is under general wage adjustments. It's listed as line numbers 1A through 1C. Lists the general wage adjustments for each of the collective bargaining units, 4.5% beginning in November 2024 for McGeo, 3.5% beginning in July 2024 for FOP, also for IAFF.
Great. Yep.
Yes.
Oh, and I probably just should have mentioned that, as you know, the IAFF is in its year 1. It was newly negotiated for this year, and the McGeo and FOP agreements are currently in their year 2, which is part of why you had so many additional decision points last year that aren't there this year. In terms of the service increments, lines 2A1 through 2C, you'll see the 3.5 service increments on employees' anniversary dates for each of the unions, and then in addition, for McGeo, the 3.5% service increment for members who would have been eligible to receive an increment in FY13.
Yes.
Then we have, moving on to longevity increments, lines 3A through 3C. McGeo 3.25% for eligible employees at 16, 20, and 25. Mr. Trumpka already explained these. 3.5% for eligible members for FOP at 15, 17, and 20 years of service, and 3.5% for eligible members of IAFF at 17, 20, and 24 years of service.
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
There are a couple of health-related provisions specific to IAFF in their newly negotiated agreement, a provision for cancer screening, well, 2 different provisions for cancer screening reimbursements.
Great. Any questions on that? No? Proceed.
Okay, and we have special pay provisions. I'm not sure what happened to the header on that one. Apologies. Oh, okay. That increases in special pay and tuition reimbursement. Excuse me. These are lines number 5C1 through 5C6, all related to IAFF's newly negotiated agreement. As Mr. Trumpka previously explained, there's a special duty pay for bomb technicians. There is special commander pay. There is a $500 certification pay for employees who complete the Tactical Emergency Casualty Care course. There is overtime pay for peer support team members who engage in certain training and continuing education. There is reimbursement for pro board certification eligible courses during initial recruit training, and there is tuition reimbursement available for up to $70,000.
Great. Looks good.
Next, we have equipment, and this one is the provision of water bottles on each apparatus for IAFF members.
Good.
Last but not least, retirement plan increases. And as was noted, well, actually, I have a correction here. I apologize. Under the line 7B FOP, should indicate that the pension benefit multiplier was increased under last year's bill, as opposed to, that was an error on my part. The McGeo bill, as you know from last year, was the one that increased the Social Security integration age. And then similarly, the pending bill 924, which was proposed in connection with the IAFF agreement, would similarly raise the Social Security integration age for IAFF members. And so that, of course, is contingent upon the council's ultimately enacting Bill 924.
Yep, we're good on that.
Great. Thank you. That covers all the items. And so since you indicated approval of the terms, then it'll be reported out that the GO committee recommends the approval of each of the respective resolutions for the full council.
Great, wonderful, terrific. Any other matters?
Just that the full council discussion is tentatively scheduled for April 30th for
Yes.
these items.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you for all the work. We appreciate it. Again, thank you for all the members of our unions who are here today, who are here every day for us. We appreciate you coming out, particularly today. And thank you to the staff for the excellent work. And with that, the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.